I'm Karen Donnelly, 42, mother of one, part-time nurse and full-time magnet for trouble. You'd think living out in the Northern Territory would mean peace and quiet. Turns out, peace here comes with fangs. Last night started like any other. Hot wind, lazy dinner, dog snoring by the door. Then came that sound, a slow scrape, like something dragging itself across the floor. My husband reckoned it was the wind, he always does. But when the floorboards moved, I realised something. In the Outback, silence isn't calm. It's the warning before something breathes. Before we get into this, tell me where you're watching from. I bet it's somewhere with proper air conditioning and no chance of a python under your kitchen table. I'm Karen Donnelly, 42, part-time nurse, full-time mother, and occasional fool for thinking peace exists in the Northern Territory. Out here, the silence doesn't comfort you, it listens. Every sound feels like a question the dark is waiting for you to answer. It was one of those nights when the air feels heavy enough to drink, the kind of heat that melts your will to live somewhere more civilized. The ceiling fan above the bed spun like it was on strike, doing nothing but mock me. My husband Jack was already asleep, mouth open, dreaming of cold beer or escape. I lay there counting the seconds between the hum of cicadas, until the hum stopped altogether. That's when I heard it. A slow, dragging scrape from the hallway. Rusty, our blue heeler, lifted his head but didn't move. The sound came again, heavier this time, like someone pulling a hose across concrete. Jack muttered something about the wind, but I knew better. The wind doesn't move like that. It was the kind of noise that gets under your skin, the kind that makes you forget how to breathe for a moment. I sat up, squinting into the dark, waiting for my eyes to adjust. The house was still, too still. No hum, no fan, no breath from the night outside. Just me, the heat, and that scrape again, closer now. I whispered Jack's name, soft at first, then louder. He grunted, turned over, and pulled the sheet up like it could protect him from whatever I'd just heard. Typical man. The world could collapse and he'd just roll over. When I finally got out of bed, the floorboards sighed under my feet, tired like everything else in this house. I moved toward the hallway, every step careful, like the air itself could snap. The faint glow from the moon slipped through the blinds, painting the room in silver dust. Rusty stood by the kitchen door, hackles raised, his tail stiff. That was enough for me. The dog knows things we don't, and right then he was saying, "Don't go there." I froze halfway to the door, every nerve in my body screaming to move and stay still at the same time. The scrape had stopped. The silence was louder now, pressing against my ears like static. My heart thumped so hard I could feel it in my fingertips. Something was there, behind the pantry, or under the table, or maybe under us. I didn't know what it was yet, but I knew this. Out here, in the middle of nowhere, when the wind stops, something else starts breathing. I told myself it was probably nothing. Out here, everything makes noise. Wind, wood, insects, even the bloody fridge when it gives up trying to stay cold. But that night, it felt different. The house had a heartbeat of its own. Rusty let out a low growl, the kind that doesn't ask questions. His eyes fixed on the space beneath the table, and I swear I saw the faintest shift of shadow, like the dark exhaled. Jack finally sat up, rubbing his eyes, muttering something about nightmares. He asked what was wrong, and I said, "You'll hear it." As if on cue, the sound came again, slower this time, heavier. Jack frowned, pulled on his boots, and grabbed the old torch from the nightstand. The beam flickered like it couldn't decide whether to live or die. I told him not to go barefoot, but he just laughed, said he'd wrangle whatever it was before I had time to panic. He walked ahead, the floor creaking under his weight. I stayed close, holding Rusty by the collar even though he was trembling like a leaf in a storm. The kitchen light switch didn't work, which somehow felt like the least surprising thing of the night. The torchlight landed on the pantry door, slightly ajar. The air smelled strange, musky, like wet leather and dust. That's when Jack froze. The beam caught a shape on the tiles, thick, coiled, breathing. For a second no one moved. Even the night outside seemed to pause, holding its breath with us. Then, with a sound I'll never forget, the shape shifted, a long, deliberate slide across the floor. Jack whispered, "Jesus Christ." Rusty barked once, sharp and panicked, then darted back behind my legs. The creature kept moving, slow and confident, like it owned the place. I couldn't see its head, just the sinuous ripple of something alive and ancient. Jack backed away, whispering, "It's a python, Karen. Stay calm." As if calm were an option. The torch trembled in his hand, casting wild shadows across the walls. Every inch of me wanted to run, but the floor felt like quicksand, I thought of Emily asleep in her room down the hall, blissfully unaware that the Outback had just sent us a guest we hadn't invited. Jack took one more cautious step back, eyes locked on the movement in the dark. I reached for my phone, only to remember there's no reception this far out. Just us, the night, and the snake that had decided to visit. Somewhere behind me, Rusty whimpered. The creature stopped moving, and in that silence I heard the faint hiss of air through scales. My pulse was louder than the insects outside. Jack whispered, "Don't make a sound." I whispered back, "I already did. If you think you can handle what happens next, stick around. Trust me, it gets worse." For a moment, I thought the thing might slither away and leave us be. Wishful thinking. It turned instead, slow and deliberate, like it had all the time in the world. The torchlight hit the scales, olive green, patterned like cracked glass, and I felt my stomach twist. It was beautiful, in a horrifying sort of way. Jack whispered, "It's a big one." I said, "No kidding, Sherlock. Even fear doesn't kill sarcasm out here." The python's body disappeared beneath the pantry door, its tail thick enough to block the light. Jack leaned closer, which told me two things. He was braver than me and possibly an idiot. I hissed for him to back off, but he waved me quiet. He said he'd seen worse in Daily Waters. I reminded him Daily Waters has a pub, not a python in the kitchen. He didn't laugh. His eyes were fixed on the dark, like he could reason with it. The air had changed. Heavier, humid, charged. I could smell the thing now, a damp, earthy scent that didn't belong in our house. Rusty whimpered again, low and broken. The creature shifted, a slow coil of muscle against tile, and the sound made my skin crawl. I grabbed a broom, because apparently my survival instinct has a sense of humour. Jack reached for the mop bucket like it was going to help. We stood there, two adults armed with cleaning supplies against prehistoric Australia. When the snake finally showed its head, time just stopped. Its tongue flicked once, tasting the air, as if it was deciding whether we were worth the trouble. Its eyes were small but ancient, the kind that make you feel like you've stumbled into someone else's world. It moved toward the light, unhurried. Jack muttered that he was going to trap it under the laundry basket. I told him if he died doing that, I'd kill him again myself. He moved faster than I expected, grabbed the basket, slammed it down. The sound echoed like a gunshot. The snake recoiled, thrashing, the basket rocking wildly. Jack pressed his boot on top to hold it steady, veins standing out on his arms. The torch fell, rolling across the floor, the beam spinning like a lighthouse in chaos. For a second it looked like he'd actually done it. Then the basket lifted, just slightly, and my heart nearly exploded through my ribs. I didn't scream, not because I wasn't terrified, but because the fear felt too big for noise. Rusty barked. Emily's door creaked open down the hall, and I knew this wasn't over. The python wasn't leaving quietly, and neither was my heartbeat. If you're still watching, tell me, what would you do if something older than your fear decided to crawl into your life? Leave your thoughts below. I need to know I'm not the only one losing sleep over this. The basket didn't hold for long. It never does it? Jack's boot slipped, the plastic cracked, and the thing underneath pushed like the earth itself wanted out. He yelled something about calling wildlife rescue, but the nearest one was probably still sleeping in Darwin. I grabbed the torch again, the beam shaking across the kitchen tiles, catching the blur of movement as the python slid free. It didn't slither. It poured, like muscle made of smoke and patience. Jack cursed under his breath, his voice tight with disbelief. The snake's tail swept across his ankle and he jumped back like he'd been burned. I shouted for him to move, and for a second it felt like we were caught in a nightmare loop, the same seconds repeating until someone screamed. Rusty barked, and the sound ricocheted off the walls. The python turned, slow and deliberate, its head raised, tasting our fear like it was something sweet. Then came the voice I didn't want to hear. "Mum?" Emily's voice. Sleepy, small, standing right at the edge of the hallway. My gut twisted. I told her to go back to her room now. She took a step forward instead, barefoot on the wooden floor, eyes wide and unblinking. Jack tried to block her view, but the torchlight betrayed us. The beam landed square on the creature. It looked impossibly long, coiled half beneath the table, half in shadow, watching. For a heartbeat, none of us moved. The only sound was the dull, rhythmic thud of my pulse. Emily whispered, "Is it real?" And Jack, because he has a strange sense of timing, muttered, "Yeah, love, it's real enough to ruin breakfast." She gasped, and I wanted to laugh at his stupidity and cry at the same time. The python shifted again, sliding closer, its scales whispering against the tile like sand over glass. The sound was calm, almost elegant. That's what made it terrifying. I grabbed Emily's arm and pulled her behind me. The weight of her hand was small, trembling, but it anchored me. Jack picked up the mop again like he was some kind of bush warrior, eyes wild but determined. The snake's head tilted, tongue flicking, reading us like a map. Rusty growled, a low, steady rumble that didn't sound like courage. It sounded like warning, and that's when I realized we weren't part of its story. We were standing in its home. Jack moved first. He swung the mop, hit the tiles, missed, and cursed again. The python reacted, fast, a blur of motion, and for a split second I thought it would strike. Instead, it turned, slipping toward the hallway, toward Emily's open door. My heart stopped, then started again twice as hard. I shouted for Jack to block it, for Emily to run, for the night to end. If you're still here, hit that subscribe button. You'll want to see how this ends, trust me. I didn't think fear could make you move faster than thought, but it does. Jack sprinted down the hall like the devil was on his heels, shouting for me to grab the torch. Emily clung to my shirt, crying without sound, her eyes fixed on the dark ahead. The python slid through the doorway, smooth as spilled oil, vanishing into her room. My brain screamed that this wasn't real. My body didn't wait for proof. I followed anyway. The room was dim, washed in moonlight from the window. Emily's school bag lay open, papers scattered like feathers. The torch beam found movement, a curve, a shimmer, then the unmistakable shape coiling near the dresser. Jack stood frozen in the doorway, sweat running down his face. He whispered, "It's huge." I wanted to say something brave, something that would make sense of this. All that came out was, "I told you the wind doesn't move like that." The snake lifted its head, slow and deliberate, tasting the air. Its tongue flicked in our direction like punctuation. Rusty barked from the hall, the sound snapping the stillness in half. The python turned, drawn by the noise, and I swear I could feel the floor vibrate under its weight. Jack lunged forward, grabbing the broom handle, pushing against the creature's side to steer it toward the open window. It didn't attack. It resisted, strong, unhurried, ancient, like it was teaching us who owned the night. Emily whispered my name, her voice trembling. I told her to get behind me and not to move, but she didn't. She took a step forward, her small hand reaching for mine. The moment her foot hit the floor, the python shifted again. Its head turned toward her, tongue flicking once, twice, reading her fear. Jack shouted, "Don't move." My heart stopped listening. I grabbed Emily and pulled her close, shielding her body with mine as if flesh could stop a miracle of muscle and instinct. Jack slammed the window open, the hinges screaming. The snake hesitated, its head swaying, torn between the noise, the movement, and the light. Jack yelled, "Go on, you bastard, out!" and shoved again with the broom. For a terrifying second it coiled tighter, ready to strike. Then it changed its mind. It slid forward, disappearing through the window into the night. The curtain fluttered like a ghost in its wake, and the air finally moved again. I didn't breathe until the sound of scales was gone. For a long moment, no one spoke. Emily cried softly into my arm. Jack leaned on the wall, shaking, trying to pretend he wasn't. I turned off the torch and let the dark return, softer now, almost kind. The Outback had given us back our silence, but it didn't feel like a gift. It felt like a warning. If you've ever faced something that reminded you how small you are, tell me in the comments. I want to know I'm not alone in remembering the sound of fear breathing. The night didn't end so much as fade out, like a bad song on an old radio. We sat in the living room until the first hint of dawn seeped through the blinds. The air was thick with the smell of sweat, fear, and instant coffee. Jack kept repeating that it was over, though his voice cracked halfway through every sentence. Emily had fallen asleep on my lap, her fingers still curled tight like she was holding onto something invisible. By sunrise, I felt older. My hands shook when I poured water into Rusty's bowl. He drank like he hadn't in days, tail thumping weakly against the floor. Jack tried calling the wildlife office, but of course, no signal, same as always. He grumbled about moving closer to town, but I knew he wouldn't. Men like him don't run from storms or snakes. They just build bigger sheds and pretend that's preparation. When the phone finally found a single bar of reception, Jack stood outside, waving it around like a magic wand. The officer who answered sounded half asleep until he heard the word python. He said, "Right, we'll send someone." Typical. I imagined a bloke in shorts and sunnies, finishing his breakfast before bothering with us. The sun was already cruel by the time the truck pulled up, a dusty white ute with a faded wildlife logo, and one very unimpressed driver. The man who stepped out looked about 70, leathery skin, voice like gravel. He nodded once, said, "You're the snake people?" Jack said, "Yeah, lucky us." The officer laughed, that low, wheezing kind of laugh that tells you he's seen worse. He walked through the house, torch in hand, muttering about breeding season and bad timing. When he opened the pantry, I half expected the python to have left a thank you note. He just whistled and said, "She's been here a while." Apparently, our unwanted guest had likely been nesting under the floorboards for weeks, eating possums and minding her business, until we gave her a reason to stretch. I stared at the gaps near the skirting board, imagining coils moving in the dark while we slept above them. The man gave a shrug that translated roughly to welcome to the Outback. Jack offered him coffee, which he refused, saying he preferred to keep his hands free for surprises. That made two of us. By the time he left, the house felt both emptier and more alive. Every sound meant something again. The wind through the trees, the creak of the floor, the kettle hissing on the stove. I looked at Jack, and for once, we didn't need to speak. The Outback doesn't forgive, it just forgets you until it remembers again. If you've made it this far, give the video a like. Not for me, but for Rusty, who actually did all the guarding while we panicked like amateurs. By the second morning, Jack was pretending the whole thing never happened. That's what he does, rewrites history before it's even cold. He patched the gap under the pantry and claimed it was a victory, like duct tape could fix trauma. I watched him hammering in silence, the sweat running down his back, and thought, men really will do anything except talk about what scared them. The Outback doesn't make you fearless, it just makes your silence thicker. Emily went back to school that day, bragging that she'd survived a monster. I let her have that story. Kids need their legends. Rusty followed her to the car, sniffed the tyres, and barked at the red dirt like it had personally betrayed him. Jack kissed her forehead, mumbled something about being brave. She asked if the snake would come back. He said no, but he didn't meet her eyes. I noticed that too. The truth doesn't live comfortably here. That night, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea that tasted like boiled dust. The horizon glowed orange, the heat still clinging to the air like regret. I kept waiting for the sound of scales, for something in the dark to breathe again. Nothing came, just the wind. The same wind Jack had sworn was harmless. I laughed quietly, because sometimes surviving feels less like luck and more like the Outback letting you off with a warning. People think living out here gives you wisdom. It doesn't. It just gives you better excuses. We tell ourselves it's freedom, but really it's just isolation dressed up with sunsets. Every sound at night becomes a sermon on survival. Every silence feels like judgment. I looked at the cracked sky and thought about how small we are. Somewhere under this same dirt, that python was probably resting, warm and unbothered, the truest local among us. When Jack finally joined me, he sat without speaking, the kind of quiet that says more than words. He handed me a beer like that was an apology. I took it. We watched the light fade together, pretending peace was permanent. He said, maybe we should move closer to town. I told him, sure, but the snakes will still find us. He smirked, said, yeah, but at least the neighbours might scream first. We both laughed, but it didn't reach our eyes. Later, when the stars came out, I thought about how everyone loves the idea of the Outback, until it breathes down their neck. It's beautiful, brutal, and honest in ways people aren't. Maybe that's why we stay. It reminds us we're temporary. So if you're listening out there, tell me, could you live where the silence listens back? Drop your answer below, and I'll tell you what it's really like when the dark decides to notice you. The silence came back the next night, heavier than before. It sat on the house like a blanket soaked in fear. Jack said we needed rest, but sleep isn't mercy, it's surrender. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the snake again, the way its body moved, unbothered, sure of its power. Sometimes I wonder if it even saw us as danger or just noise, two foolish humans fumbling in something ancient's home. Jack started fixing things again, the window latch, the broken step, the back fence that's been leaning since we moved in. He said it helped him think. I think it helped him avoid thinking. That's the thing about men like Jack. They don't heal, they patch. And me. I talk too much, drink too much tea and pretend I'm fine until the dark gets too loud. Every night it comes closer, whispering that I was never really in control. Emily's been drawing snakes in her notebooks. Little green spirals, smiling faces, sometimes wings. She says it helps her not be scared. I told her that's brave, but inside it made something cold twist in my chest. Maybe that's how it starts, turning what terrifies you into something you can hold. Maybe she'll grow up stronger than me, less shaken by the things that crawl in the dark. Or maybe she'll just learn to hide it better. The morning after the python, I caught myself standing by the window, waiting to see movement. Not from fear this time, but from something else. I wanted to see it again. The calm, the stillness, The reminder that life doesn't care if you're comfortable. It's strange how fast horror becomes fascination. Maybe that's what the Outback does. It humbles you, then dares you to keep pretending you're bigger than it. We never win that fight. We just last longer. Jack doesn't talk about that night anymore. When I bring it up, he changes the subject or walks out to the shed. He thinks silence makes it disappear, but I see it in him, the stiffness in his shoulders, the way he double-checks the locks, the new habit of sleeping with one arm over the edge of the bed like a guardrail. He pretends he's protecting us. I think he's just trying to hold the world still. Sometimes I step outside after midnight and listen. The cicadas hum, the wind carries dust, and the stars hang so close you could almost touch them. But beneath all that, there's something else. A pulse, slow and patient. Maybe it's the earth. Maybe it's what we woke up that night. Maybe it's just me, remembering. Whatever it is, I know it's still here, waiting. If you've ever felt that, the thing that watches while you sleep, tell me. I want to know if it whispers your name too. It's strange how quickly life goes back to pretending. A week after it happened, the kettle still whistled, the mail still came, and the heat still pressed against the windows like a constant reminder. But something in me had shifted. I used to believe the Outback was quiet because it was empty. Now I know better. It's quiet because it's listening, and once it's heard you scream, it never forgets the sound. Jack went back to work on the roads. He left early, came home late, and talked about nothing but machinery and weather. Emily stopped drawing snakes, at least on paper, but sometimes I'd see her gaze linger on the floorboards, eyes following invisible shapes only she could see. Maybe she still hears it too. Maybe that night stitched itself into us, silent but permanent, like the red dust that never really washes off. I've stopped trying to fix the house. Every creak, every hum, every rattle of wind against the tin roof feels like a voice now, not a warning, but a reminder. The Outback doesn't want your fear. It wants your respect. You live here on its terms, and the moment you forget that, it reminds you who's older, who's patient, who's still breathing beneath your feet. Maybe that's the closest thing to God this place ever gave us. Sometimes I dream of the snake, not attacking, not chasing, just moving endlessly across red earth under a sky that never ends. In those dreams, I'm not afraid. I walk beside it. Maybe that's madness, or maybe it's peace. I've learned that fear doesn't die when the danger leaves. It just changes shape. Sometimes it slithers, sometimes it smiles. Sometimes it sounds like your husband saying, "Everything's fine," when you both know it isn't. The neighbours stopped by last week, said they heard a story about a snake in the Donnelly house. I told them it was true, but we're all still here mostly. They laughed, said, "Only in the territory." I smiled, poured them tea, and watched a shadow move across the veranda. The wind picked up, brushing my arm like scales. I didn't flinch this time. Some things stop being monsters once you learn their rhythm. When the night comes now, I sit outside with Rusty and listen. The land hums, alive and endless, and I swear it hums back. People talk about surviving the Outback like it's a victory. It isn't. It's a conversation, one you never really finish. So if you're still here, tell me, have you ever stared into the dark and felt it blink back? Leave your answer below. I'll be out here, listening, same as it's always been.